Evening then, everybody. Welcome back to Budapalita, Nagarjuna. Little break there. We've got time to do some more again now. Still got quite a few verses to do. See how we get on. Yeah, so I have been revising the translation a little bit, so there's still, things to tinker with. But we're okay till we get to verse 19. Nothing changes until verse 19. Yeah, so we've covered 13 verses, so we're on verse 14. What have we got to so far? As I say, we just arbitrarily chose this chapter to look at because that's got the most Sanskrit that kind of survives of Budapalita. All of Nagarjuna is in Sanskrit, all his verses, but Budapalita's commentary on his scrap, so this was the best one for Sanskrit. So that's the only reason for choosing it. But it's got some, it's got some kind of interesting odd stuff, plus some, mainline good arguments against inherent existence. So it's a good mixture, really. And we are going to study a couple of the more kind of prominent arguments refuting inherent existence next. They're not arguments that you find in standard text, like somebody's explaining emptiness to people just wanting the sort of straightforward arguments. They're not in the Lamrim Chemmo, where he gives a thorough, Tsongkhapa gives a thorough presentation of the emptiness of persons, the emptiness of phenomena, and they're not in Chandrakirti's entering the middle way, which is Chandrakirti's text that's most studied in the sense it's probably the Lugpa Geshe program. They're not in there. Again, in that text, Chandrakirti sort of chooses to just restrict himself to a couple of, forceful main arguments without giving the great variety of stuff that you actually find in Nagarjuna's wisdom standards if you assemble all his arguments. So they're a bit, maybe a bit sort of a less well known than the arguments that Chandrakirti uses in Entering the Middle Way and then Tsongkhapa uses in Lamrim Chemmo. So what have we got to so far, though? I mean, just to recap just for a minute, I mean, in the first verse, we were talking about refuting inherent existence or critique of inherent existence by way of, characteristic and object characterized. So that would be something like, hot and burning and fire. So looking at those two and the relationship between them, and then how there can't be any satisfactory kind of, presentation of them if things are inherently existent. Not going back to those arguments, just mentioning. And then we talked about the three characteristics of conditioned things. This is the chapter is on the investigation of conditioned things. It's the investigation of arising, lasting, and ceasing, or arising, lasting, and destruction. So can these three characteristics, which are the general characteristics, the defining characteristics of conditioned things, can they exist on any object either singly or all together at one time? So using that critique, we found that neither of those alternatives is viable. So if they can't exist either singly on the object, such as pot or seed or something, and they can't exist all together at once either, then, they're refuted. So a refutation of inherently existing, arising, lasting, and ceasing, we can say, from with the help of Tsongkhapa, Nagarjuna, and Budapalita, don't make it quite so easy to distinguish between refuting arising and refuting inherently existent arising, but Oh yeah, I'm one who trusts Tsongkhapa in these matters. So yeah, neither singly nor in combination. That was verses 2 to 3. Number 3, the third point is maybe, well, roughly speaking. So those 3 characteristics, arising, lasting, and destruction, do they have the 3 characteristics of conditioned phenomena themselves? If they are conditioned things, then they should also have the 3 characteristics of arising, lasting, and destruction. Each one of those individually should have those 3 characteristics themselves, because they're each individually are conditioned phenomena, presumably. So how that works out, then the fault of infinite regress and so forth. And if you say, well, those 3 characteristics, arising, lasting, and destruction themselves, don't have the 3 characteristics of arising, lasting, and destruction themselves, then does that mean they're not conditioned phenomena? Which is kind of strange. So that's another way Nagarjuna attacks the lower school's presentation of these things. And then after that comes this critique of, there's somebody tried to say, well, arising, if you remember the great expositionists or the Vaibhashikas, they argue that these 3 characteristics, arising, lasting, and destruction, are kind of actually causal characteristics. It's not that pot just arises, but the fact that arising causes pot to arise. The factor of arising on pot causes pot to arise. So that's refuted even by the Sautrantikas, even by the Sutra followers, never mind Nagarjuna. It's just a particular view of some of these early great expositionist schools that arising causes pot to arise, lasting causes pot to last, and ceasing causes pot to cease. So that's evaluated and found to be not very useful. But the opponent is insisting that arising in the end gives rise to itself and can give rise to other entities. So we're on about verse 8 there. But then what comes up then from verse 8 to 12 is this kind of analysis of the opponent's example. Arising causes itself to arise and other things to arise, just as a lamp illuminates itself and illuminates other entities. A lamp illuminates itself and it illuminates other things. So in the same way, arising gives rise to itself and gives rise to other things. Which is I find that very tricky. The lamp and its light. Doesn't a lamp surely, okay, even if it doesn't illuminate itself, doesn't it illuminate other things? Well, not the way the sutra followers and so on want to believe, not the way the lower schools want to believe. Tsongkhapa, again, he does allow that the lamp does illuminate other phenomena, but again, if you bring inherent existence into it, then it ruins everything. And if you remember, it's the arising lamp that illuminates things. We say the lamp illuminates things because the arising lamp illuminates them. So that was I found that quite tricky, but through trying to teach it, last year, I thought I'd broken through it a bit of a better understanding. So it was useful for me, even if, it wasn't explaining great depth, because we were reaching the end of the year and everything. But anyway, we've made an acquaintance with that. That is a kind of an example that comes up in some of Nagarjuna's other works, as Jimpa has shown. Other places where Nagarjuna uses that example again, or his opponent uses it or something. And it also comes up in Shantideva's 9th chapter, of course, But there the argument is about the mind. Does the mind know itself? And does the mind know other things, you see? So I think that the lamp and its illuminating itself is used in a different context, trying to prove the existence of these self-cognizers or something. It's a useful one to know, kind of the ins and outs of that argument. So that was verse 8 to 12. And then, if you try to say that arising does give rise to itself, can something cause itself? That's pretty extreme position, and that's kind of refuted in verse 13. And then from there, we are arrived at where we are now. So Nagarjuna dismissed arising giving rise to itself, but now can arising give rise to other entities? So this, we're still on this question then of what does arising do? Does it actually have any causal power? And but at this point, you know, it doesn't really matter what you take as the cause. You know, arising. How can arising cause the pot? You know, we usually think of arising as just being, you know, something like something that occurs, and at the end of the process, you have a pot, right? So is arising kind of some sort of special force above and beyond the ordinary causes and conditions? Well, that seems pretty odd to us. Does lasting make pot last? No, it's just lasting something that occurs, you know, as pot maintains a continuum of its similar type. It's not like the factor of lasting is causing pot to last or anything like that. The factor of ceasing is causing pot to cease. That's a bit out of the way, you know. But anyway, the great expositions put that forward as being their position. But as I say, right now, don't think of arising being, you know, some sort of weird type of cause. Whatever cause you take, does seed give rise to sprout? You see, and does you know, fire give rise to smoke? So we're talking, you know, just basic cause and effect here. Nothing fancy about particular special, you know, great expositionist kind of uncommon, you know, choices of cause. Just cause and effect in general. How does it work? You know. And the thrust of Nagarjuna is to deny, isn't it? You know, there's no arising, there's no ceasing, there's no coming, there's no going, there's no single, there's no different, and all that. So, you know, what exactly does it mean? And what exactly does the Heart Sutra mean, you know, when it says something the same? You know, all phenomena are emptiness, you know, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, and, you know, not division, not fulfilled or something. So in the very Heart Sutra, it says things are unproduced. So you know, that's what we're trying to understand. So we're just talking ordinary cause and effect here, and so you could say, does seed give rise to something other than itself? And you know, the Vaibhashikas would say, oh yes, or the Sautrantikas would say, oh yes, you know, well, seed gives rise to sprout. Well, we'd all say that. So what's going on here? What's the refutation then? What's this devastating, you know, kind of prasangika or middle way critique? Okay, so that brings us up to where we got to, just about, I think. Yeah, so if I was going back over this text, there are other things I would change a bit, like we the appendix on the lamp illuminating itself or not. You know, I would change that a bit now, thinking I've got a bit of a better understanding. But I'm not doing that right now. But it's just something in the future. And there's that other kind of, you know, document we had opponent schools, their views on the condition. That was giving some relevant points. So relevant to this chapter, so I maybe put that in an appendix in the future. So yeah, there's things to work on yet. And you know, we've covered some tricky points, so we're getting some acquaintance with Nagarjuna's style here. And there are more tricky points to come. These arguments that are kind of about not refuting now any oddball kind of, you know, lower schools positions, but refuting the clinging to inherent existence, which is kind of what we're more interested in. Because if you realize emptiness, then you know you're really kind of, you know, making progress. You're really making sense of things at last, or realize, you know, the very nature of your own, you know, absence of self or something. So these are really sort of central issues of the Buddhist path. So the next arguments are kind of right on that target. Yeah, so We can look at verse 14, I guess, now. So, what was my new translation? Very little different from the one in the book. You just trying to make it fit into the meter of the verse, and be more chantable. Yeah, it's working on making it chantable. Also, so arising or arisen or not yet arisen. None of these arise at all, as spelt out by the being gone, gone, and not gone on. So we're out to refute the existence of arising, you see. Later on down in the text, we'll get onto lasting and ceasing, but lasting and destruction. But right now we're on to the fallacy of believing in arising. So underneath that then, Budapalita's explanation that the arisen arises is not tenable by any means, and not the unarisen, nor the arising either. How is that? So, if you are investigating whether arising exists or not, and that's what Nagarjuna is out to deny. So you can look at the 3 time phases, yeah. The arisen, the pot that already exists, the pot that has existed and gone out of existence. Something's in the past. Like the arisen, that which has arisen. That does not arise. Okay, and then what about the unarisen? Does that arise? Well, no. That needs a bit of an explanation. And the arising doesn't arise either. Yeah, so whether you talk about arising, arisen, or not yet arisen, none of them arise at all. So the order in the verse and the order in the commentary is slightly different. Never mind, that's just the order of how the 3 are taken, which are taken first and last. Okay, so you're saying that we're saying those 3 don't arise, so it's our own system pulling this forward. So how is that? And it says, how will you understand that then? As spelt out by the being gone, gone, and not gone on. So I just slightly changed that last line as well. Just reversing the order to make it exactly like the Sanskrit. Being gone, gone, and not gone on. So how do we understand these sort of very condensed phrases? Well, let's read a bit of the commentary first. Just as the gone on, it should be gone on, not gone over. See, there's, never mind. Just as the gone on is not being gone on or gone over, it means the same, but I'm just trying to refine my translation and not kind of, done enough editing yet. Just as the gone over is okay. Just as the gone over is not being gone over due to the finishing of the action of going. Yeah. So if you've got a piece of ground and you've got something that's going over the ground, like a chariot or something, or even your feet, if it's already been gone over, then there's no being gone over on that place, right? Because it's the gone over's happened. Your chariot has rolled over that. So there's no going over on that part of the path because it's been gone on already due to the finishing of the action of going. So there's no going there. And so just like that, the arisen is not arising due to the finishing of the act of production, the act of producing. Yeah, so if it's arisen, then you don't expect it to be arising. It's already happened. So that's kind of one of the the three possibilities that's easy to dismiss, relatively speaking. There is no action of producing the arisen again. Were it produced again, it would never not be produced. If once it had been produced, and then it keeps on being produced, then how would it ever stop being produced? Once it's produced, and it doesn't arise, and then it stopped arising because it's finished arising. If you say, oh, okay, it can arise again and again and again, then you have to be, you'd be talking about somebody being born from their mother again and again and again. It only happens once. So that is not acceptable. So the arisen does not arise. Now, nor does the unarisen arise. So this needs a bit of qualification. And, in Sanskrit, all you've got is unarisen, or not arisen. So it's like the past participle with a negative, the unarisen. But Tsongkhapa says you interpret that to the that which has not yet begun to arise. So that word for him in his understanding deals with the future, yeah. That which has not yet begun to arise. Yeah? So the cause and conditions have not started to operate to produce it. Okay, so he says it's not arisen, okay, but it's not yet arisen. But I think the best way to explain it is not yet arising. It hasn't yet begun to arise. It's still so far in the future that the causes and conditions aren't yet operating to produce it. So that's how Tsongkhapa says we should understand it. And it makes sense in the sense you want to have, you want to examine the past, the future, and the present. So where is the action of arising? And Nagarjuna is saying it's not in any of the three times. So it's not in the past, we've discussed that. So now, can we have arising in the future? Yeah. Well, again, you have a problem, yeah. So it's not yet begun to arise. That's our understanding of what this word means. And then so, well, there's nothing there. There's no existence. Yeah, there's nothing to talk about there. It's in the future, therefore it's not in the present. Yeah. If it's still in the future, it can't be doing the arising in the present. The action of arising of that object, whatever it is, has not happened yet. It's not started. So for Budapalita says, due to its non-existence, for what that is unarisen will arise. If a non-existent thing may arise, then a hare's horn may also arise, but it does not arise. So the arisen does not arise either. Yeah, but you say, well, it's unarisen, but it could be arising, right? It hasn't arisen yet, but it could arise. So, you have sort of a qualm there. But where is that the way Budapalita is coming from? He said, if it's non-existent, then how can it arise? That's maybe a challenge to these people of the lower schools. You see, we can posit it to be arising, even if it's non-existent now. We can posit it to be arising, like when we've talked about this before, kind of many times, really. The farmer has ploughed his field and he's sowed his field with the seeds, and the field's been dry, but at last the rain comes. At last there's a good fall of rain, so you can say, now the sprouts are arising. But he's projecting, yeah? He's projecting. That's what's happened in the sense that there are no sprouts, and he can't point to a sprout that is arising. He just has to know that from his experience, that's what's happening. He's like, it's just an appearance in his mind that the sprouts are arising because there's no sprout to show. It's only what's going to happen. So he's just, from his experience, knows that's what will happen. Whereas if you think things are inherently existent, as you said, then the sprout is arising inherently, then we should be able to point to the sprout there. That's the thing that's doing the arising. This idea of dependent and dependent upon have to be, simultaneous in time. So that argument is we've prefigured it many times, but the full discussion of it is still coming, it's still ahead of us. It's not right, kind of right on the agenda just now. So we're not quite sure how to take Budapalita's words there. But the way Tsongkhapa explains it is simple, it's like, well, it hasn't begun to arise yet. It's in the future, so it can't have any conflicts with the present. If it hasn't yet begun to arise, there's no point in talking talking. If it hasn't yet begun to arise, there is no point in talking about it arising. And when we're talking arising, we want to see arising now. But this thing hasn't yet begun to arise, so it's fairly simple then, the way he helpfully explains it, to sort of dismiss that which has not yet begun to arise does not arise either. So that's less, that's refuted the two easy ones, the two ones that you include to be kind of thorough and complete in your analysis. But what about the arising, the thing that is arising now? Isn't that arising? Well, it must be, obviously. But what does Budapalita say? Now that which is arising does not arise. Well, thank you. Yes, that's very clear. That which is arising does not arise due to the non-existence of arising apart from the arisen and the unarisen. And because it follows that there will be two arisings, one in consequence of which it becomes the arising, and one in consequence of which it is said to arise. So these are the two arguments that I'm saying that are, to refute inherent existence, and I haven't seen them anywhere else. And the one about dependent and dependent, dependent upon and dependent being simultaneous, if you remember that one from previous last year's talks, that one is still to come, and so that's another one. But it's not really kind of on the list here yet. It's just two here. There's two arguments. One is there's due to the non-existence of arising apart from the arisen and the unarisen. And the other one is because it follows there will be two arisings, one in consequence of which it becomes the arising, and one in consequence of which it is said to arise. So those are the two arguments. So we take them one by one. They're not kind of to be taken together. We look at them individually. So I'm going to leave Budapalita's text there, and try to explain things a bit more on my own before we go back to his own argument, which needs to be thought about as a sort of something. A bit more thought yet. Yeah, I'm not sure I've got these arguments fully worked out. I do have a qualm, but it's hard to put your finger on what the qualm is sometimes. But anyway, we'll get somewhere tonight with one of those arguments. And just to point out, going back to the verse, arising the arisen or, the new translation, arising or arisen or not yet arisen, none of these arise at all, as spelt out by the being gone, and not gone on. So he's referring you back there on the last line to an earlier chapter. So there's a chapter of chapter 2, I think it is. It's analysis of going or something. I don't know what the actual name of the title of the chapter is offhand, but it's all about going, yeah, and the chariot or the person walking, So they analyze the action of going. You see, does going exist on that part of the path which has been gone over? Does it exist on that part of the path which is being gone over, or does it exist on that part of the path which is not yet being gone over? So Budapalita starts off by mentioning going, but by the end of his paragraph, he's kind of forgotten about it. He only uses going for the first in the denial of the past one, the arisen one. It's so where these arguments are coming up are. See, here he just refers to them. That's all he says, you see, due to the non-existence of arising, apart from the arisen and unarisen, and it follows there will be two arisings, one in consequence of which it becomes the arising, and one in consequence of which it is said to arise. So those arguments he doesn't spell out. And you go to Tsongkhapa for more explanation, and he kind of gives a bit more description of close comparison between arisen, arising, and going and gone and stuff. But he's already discussed these arguments in chapters 1 and 2, so I had to go back there then and start worrying about what these arguments actually were by researching in other chapters. Because as I say, we've dived into the middle of this text, so that's all right. But then some of the arguments that are coming up are ones that have already been explained in earlier chapters. So we have to go back and pick up from there. Fine, that's all right. But yeah, they're quite arguments that give you quite a lot of thought. But anyway, let's try and explain a bit. So we take the first one. There's no arising in the present because there's no arising apart from the unarisen and the not yet arisen. So how do we understand that? Yes. Well, let's say they're all being denied on the ultimate level. So that's the way Budapalita and Nagarjuna's arguments are going. They're always denying things, but that means they're denying them things on the ultimate level. So things, they don't exist by way of their own power. They don't exist by way of their own nature. So we can say, along with Tsongkhapa, giving his sort of masterful, sane explanations that arising exists conventionally. We can posit arising, but when we search for it to be there by its own power, we can never find it, and that's what Nagarjuna is telling these other schools. You see, you want it to be there by its own power. You think everything's got to be there by its own power. But that's what you'll never find. So there's no arising in the sense there's no arising in the way that you talk about it. And what arising is left after that's refuted is like very different from the arising we imagine is happening. And it's so different that you might, it's like in the Heart Sutra. You say there's no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness. It's a very devastating kind of way of putting things. Because the actual mode of existence things do have is so very near to, so far away from this heavy grasping we've got at these things, and it's so much nearer to the fact of not even existing at all. We talk about selflessness, emptiness, voidness. So yeah. The lower schools have got very good presentations of cause and effect as far as they go. They take you kind of a good way into impermanence and all that. But, it's not good enough for Nagarjuna. So we can accept there's no arising in the past, everything's already arisen, or there's no arising in this future where things haven't yet begun to arise. So, but what about the arising that's, the thing that is arising now, and it is in the process of arising and it's coming up, but it hasn't yet come into existence? Aren't the things doing that? Isn't that what we mean by arising? They've started to come into existence, but they haven't got into existence yet. The process of producing them is still going on. And they're at this moment. Why not? So let me start with an example that first example that seemed to make sense to me. I'm not talking about going and gone over that. The argument in the second chapter is a bit complicated. I've translated it all, but still, I got wondering a bit. But if examples from my own thinking, then. So what about if somebody, you're reading a book or something like that, your friend telephones you or something, or just some theoretical situation. So they interrupt your reading, and then they say, well, what are you doing? I say, well, I'm reading. What are you reading? So you tell them what book you're reading. So then the conversation gets a bit more like analytical now. That would be the ordinary conversation. But suppose it was me who was ringing you up, and I would say, okay, You know, apart from the read and unread, the read and the unread, where is the bit that you're actually reading? You know, so it seems quite normal in the world to say, well, you know, what part of the book are you reading? Oh, because well, I'm reading the 3rd chapter. You know, that might be a very natural answer. So somebody says, yeah, but where in the 3rd chapter have you got to then? Whereabouts in the 3rd chapter have you got to then, mate? And they said, well, I'm reading, I don't know, I'm reading page 56 or something. So yeah, you are reading this. When the phone rang, you were reading page 56. That would be a fair answer. Okay, but then says, but where on page 56 have you got to? I said, well, I was just finished. I said, well, you know, if you really got, if you're really being precise, he said, well, I was just in the middle of the 2nd sentence. And, you know, so if you go down like that and keep asking the questions, so, you know, there might be one word in the 2nd sentence. I was looking at this long word in the middle of the 2nd sentence or something like that. And says, well, you know, what word was it? And I said, well, I made by the word beautifully or something like that. You know, so then you read that word beautifully. Okay, that's where we're reading that long word. And then you've not read any word beyond that, you see. So that's it. You see, you've got what you've read and what you haven't read. So where's the bit you're actually reading? So, you know, the present should be the primary tense, right? The past is that which is already happened before the present. And the future is that which is not yet, you know, not yet happened yet, not yet kind of taken place relative to the present. So the present should be the primary tense, but when you look for it, you start to wonder, well, where is it? Where is the bit you're actually reading? You know, you read that word, and what's the next word then? Well, I didn't read it. I don't know. I don't know what it says. You know, I don't know what the next word is after beautifully because I didn't look. You know, you rang me up, you interrupted me. So then the word after beautifully, you've not read it. If you had read it, you would understand it. You'd be able to tell. The next word after beautiful was this one, you know, because I read it and I knew what it was, but I don't know what it is because I've not read it. So there you are. You've got what's happened, you know, what's been read and what's not yet been read. So where's the bit that's actually been reading? You're actually reading. So you start to think then, you know, where is this bit that I'm supposed to be reading? And generally say, well, I'm reading the book, aren't I? I'm reading the book. Yeah, or I'm reading the 3rd chapter. We say that and it sounds quite all right. What page are you on? I'm reading page 56. I'm in the middle of it. Well, that sounds all right. But, you know, when you say, well, what about page 56 then? Well, you read some of it, the 1st chapter, the 1st paragraph and a half, and you haven't read the other part, you know, the last 2.5 paragraphs or something. You've not read those. But that's how it, you know, when you stand back, oh, I'm reading page 56, then when you ask, you know, well, where is the bit you're actually reading? It becomes hard to say, doesn't it? So that's one example to puzzle over. And, you know, this is the direction of Nagarjuna's logic, you see. And then another example, which is maybe equally kind of, you know, sort of not so difficult to get your mind around, but quite puzzling in the sense of what we're trying to understand. So this is a piece of ice melting. So you take a piece of ice out of the fridge, or a piece of ice that's, you know, formed in your garden in the winter, and then the sun comes up once in a while and it starts to melt. So the ice is starting to melt now. So you have ice, a little piece of ice, you know, sticking in the middle of your saucer or something in the middle of your plate out in the open air, or, you know, wherever it is. Put it in front of the radiator. And then you've got water appearing, you see. You've got water. And that water, if it's a warm room or something, the water might be evaporating. The water might be changing into vapor. But let's not worry about that. We have the water, we have the ice, and we have the water. So there's no intermediate state, is there? It's either ice or it's water. So which bit of ice is melting then? So you've got ice that's not melted yet. And then you've got water, which is ice that has already melted. So where's the ice that's melting? Where's the ice that's turning into water? Either it is ice or it's water. So where's the ice that's becoming water? Well, you can say the whole piece of ice. You took a piece of ice out of the fridge or out of the garden, and you brought it into the warm place. You say that piece of ice that I put on the plate, a minute ago, that's melting. Yeah, but it's only melting in the sense that half of it is ice and half of it is water. So where's the bit that's actually melting? Well, it's all melting, yeah. Well, well, I'm reading the whole book, aren't I? I'm reading the book, I'm reading the chapter. Yeah, you can say that, and that makes perfect sense, in conventional terms. But if you say, well, where is the bit that's you're actually reading, that's kind of existing by its own side, is that bit that's being, that's being read now. Whereas the ice is actually melting, you can't point to anything. So my third example is again something I had to think about myself, struggling to try and make sense of these arguments for myself. So what about somebody knitting a scarf then? So that's just straightforward knitting. It's just one long piece. There's no sort of sleeves or special parts or fingers or anything. It's just knitting a long piece of knitting, which is just pretty consistent, same number of stitches every line, So we could say, well, it's got different colors, so it's got this yellow at the one end, and then it's red in the middle and blue at the other end or something. So three pieces, 3 colors. So you're going to change color twice in the middle of making it. So you can say, well, I've already knitted the blue bit. So you're halfway through knitting the scarf, right? So the scarf is 1 meter long. So you've knitted 50 centimeters. So then, okay, so you've knitted the blue bit. That's 30 something centimeters. So now you're in the middle. So you're now knitting the yellow bit. So then there's a red bit still to come. You haven't started that. So how far are you got with the scarf then? Well, I'm halfway there. So I'm half finished. So which bit are you knitting now then? Well, I've knitted the blue bit and now I'm knitting the yellow bit. What about the red bit? I haven't started that yet, so that's not yet arisen. You're just on the blue, so you have to say I'm knitting the yellow bit, don't I? But you can only say I'm knitting the yellow bit in the sense that half of it is knitted and half of it is not knitted. But where's the bit you're actually knitting? Yeah, it always comes down to half done and half not done. So I'm not saying all actions are as easy as that to discriminate between this is happening, that's not happening, or this is done, that's not done. But maybe you can think of more difficult ones. But Tsongkhapa, the only example I found that he gives, apart from this, he explains the right going, not gone, gone on. Well, sorry, gone on, going on, and not yet gone on. He explains that in great detail. But it's a bit complicated. The other example he gave was consciousness, you see, which is an interesting one. He says, somebody says, oh, what about something that's arising and it's in the process of arising and is not yet arisen. So you can easily come up with something. You think, well, there's got to be something that's arising now. So then the example that Tsongkhapa comes back in his response to that, he says, what about, there's a consciousness. So that's the example consciousness, you see. So whatever consciousness you look at, if you try to declare it's arising, what it will mean is that it's half arisen and half not arisen. So that was, how would you have a consciousness that's half arisen and half not arisen? It's like a scarf. You can think, well, this person knitting a scarf and they've done 50 centimeters out of the 100. It kind of makes sense. Although the page that you're reading, you've read the top half, but not the bottom half. But consciousness. So I think what he must mean is over time. So you have a consciousness of 2 minutes, 2 minutes long. Have a feeling of pleasure or something that lasts for 2 minutes. I don't know. You go out and lockdown is over. You can go out into the country again. You're allowed to have a walk in the warm sunshine after all the cold, weather of winter or something. It's all allowed again or something. So you have a great feeling of pleasure walking in the sunshine in the countryside. So this feeling of pleasure lasts for 2 minutes, let's say. So then if you're in the middle of that, you've got half the pleasure, half the moment, half the time of pleasure, half the episode of pleasure has gone past. Is that what it means? Yeah. So you can say this consciousness is arising in the sense that it's half arisen and half not arisen. I guess I think is that what it means? You can say, well, the consciousness is already arisen because you are happy now. But if you're thinking of it lasting over time, the 2 minute episode of consciousness will only have arisen when you get to the end of 2 minutes. So it's a little bit more difficult. So first of all we're talking about parts in space. The sort of the scarf, or the book. You can say, well, this part, you can point, this part has been read, this point has not been read. But in the consciousness, it's over time, yeah. So part of the consciousness has happened, but the later part of the consciousness has not yet happened. So that's a pass over time. So maybe that's what Tsongkhapa was talking about when consciousness has half arisen, half not arisen. So it is a bit different. So that's another one, you have to sort of take into account. I guess what it must mean is that, the consciousness of the 2 minute consciousness hasn't arisen. The 2 minute long consciousness has not arisen until 2 minutes have passed. But you have to think about that. Like has 2021, has it arisen? Well, you say, yes, it's here now. So it's not arising then. No, it's not arising, it's lasting now. Well, I don't know how to think about it exactly. Just giving you something to work on, because so that's kind of, that's kind of, what does it make any sense to you, right? So if you want it to be inherently existent, you see, then you're going to have to say, well, there should be the 3 times, right? There should be the past, the present, and the future, and these should be able like separable, you can point to them. That's the arisen, this is the arising, and that's the yet to arise, But when we look for the arisen, so if we look for the arising, then we've got sort of that which has arisen, that which is not yet arisen. They're just sort of meeting each other. So where's the bit that's arising? So it's like there's nothing from its own side which is doing any arising. All you've got is like the arising that we're kind of positing. You know, I'm reading the book. It means I've half read it and half not read it. So that's enough to say I'm reading the book. If I'm still interested in it, I haven't abandoned it. I haven't thrown the book to one side. I'm still reading it. But I've read half of it and I've not read the other half. So then on that basis, I say, well, I'm reading the book. But it's like, you know, there's no kind of present that's really there from its own side. It's just like a legitimate positing of arising or reading onto something that's partly in the past and partly in the future. So that's what I'm reading. And it could be the whole book. I'm reading the whole book. That sounds all right. I'm reading this chapter. I'm reading the 3rd chapter now. I'm reading page 56. I'm halfway down page 56. You know, so it's kind of up to you where you draw the boundaries of what's in the past and what's in the future. But you kind of have a bit of both and say, then there, that's what I'm reading. So we can positively that which I'm reading in this very, like, you know, it's in the perspective of my mind that I'm reading it. But when you try to posit from the side of the object that which is being read, you can't do it. So that's, you know, trying to say how there's a conventional, you know, positable, you know, sort of talk aboutable reading, present reading, but it has got no way of existing from its own side. So that would be the contrast between the two types of, you know, the ultimately existent reading and the merely conventionally posited being read. So does that make any sense? Anybody like to comment?
I've got a question, but
yes,
I think it makes reasonable sense, yeah. If you're looking for inherent existence. But, well, 2 questions maybe, but one, you know, the argument against inherent existence where, you know, if it's not inherently 1 or it's not inherently 2, then it's not inherently existent. Or if it's...
Well, it's not inherently 1 or many, right?
1 or many, yeah. Then the reason you go down that route is to negate anything is possible at all. If it can't be 1 or it's not many, then it's there's no basis for it to exist. That's right, isn't it?
Well, yeah, that's right. If it's not 1 or many, those two being completely, you know, fully directly contradictory, it's got to be one. If it's got to be one or the other, yeah.
Yeah, and is it similar to that, this argument in a way? Because if you prove that nothing arises, there's no status of that existing really out there, then you remove all possibility of anything being inherently existent, because nothing can arise at all. Is that part of the avenue?
Well, you'd have to refute permanent phenomena.
Yeah, I mean, on the whole, yeah, but most of our lives are dominated by functioning things, aren't they? In a way, in a sense. But yeah, no, you still have to go down the permanent route.
So our connection doesn't seem so good.
No, it fades in and out a little bit.
Anyway, have you got a question then? I mean, well, if something is neither 1 nor many, it can't exist.
Yeah, it was probably more.
If it's neither inherently 1 nor many, it can't inherently exist.
Yeah.
So that's a strong reason for way of talking about inherent existence, refuting it.
Yeah. So slightly different then. In this case as well, when we're using the word inherent existence, can you use the word objective? existence? Has that ever been used in these texts? Do you think that's
it has, yes. Objectively existence would mean like existence by the power of the object or from the object's own side.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they do use it sometimes, but I don't think, the opposite is that subjective. Does it subjectively exist? You don't hear that so much. That sounds a bit fishy somehow, but it doesn't objectively exist. You sometimes hear that. It doesn't know existence from the side of the object. I take that to mean, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because one of the things that I'm trying to understand when looking at these texts is, does everybody mean the same thing by inherent existence? Because for me, for example, independent existence feels, they're arguing against whether something can exist without depending on something else. Fine. But the idea that exists beyond objectively feels like a slightly different thing to me. But I know they're not when you ultimately break them down. But anyway.
So you think it existing independently, like, is that existing inherently? Is it those two are okay?
Well, what I mean is there seems to be
those two mean the same thing.
Yeah, they're slightly different. It feels like you can argue that something exists independent of other objects, but whether it exists independent of mind seems to be could become a different question. So I wonder sometimes whether everyone means the same thing in all the texts when they use the phrase inherent existence in all the different teachers. That's all.
It's a bit difficult to hear what you're saying, actually.
Yeah, that's all right. I'll try and clarify the question better for next time.
Well, some of these terms seem to have, different sort of status for different schools. Yeah. Like, if you said to a Prasangika, if it doesn't exist by its own characteristics, then it necessarily doesn't inherently exist then. So he'd sort of say yes. But if you said that to another school, they say things inherently exist, but they don't exist by way of their own characteristics. You might see some difference between those two, But that's usually the kind of lower schools, like inherently exist, objectively exist, truly exist, substantially exist. All these terms, ultimately exist in for the Prasangikas. They all end up having the same reference. They're all kind of equivalent to each other. If they existed, they would be equivalent. Mutually inclusive, but none of them exist, so they can't say they're actually mutually inclusive. Yeah.
Casey Graham?
Yes.
Can you hear me? No?
Yes, a little bit broken up, but I can hear you.
Yeah. So when you were talking about the book, reading the book,
yeah,
it sounded like you can only find the past or the future, like there is no present moment to be found.
Yes, no present active reading, or no, a present active reading, yes.
So does it mean that if you believe in inherent existence, there is no present moment?
Well, they think there is, but when we look for the inherent existent, active reading, we can't find it. So then that somehow proves that their attitude is wrong. That the only reading there is one that's posited, and is just conventionally understood.
But
and an ultimate kind of way of finding it.
If there is no present moment, then there is basically no time.
Yeah. That's what Nagarjuna is saying. Yeah? There's no arising, no ceasing, no coming, no going, and all that. So then there'll definitely be no time. No past, no present, no future.
What is the relationship between a book and time? I'm just obsessed with time at the moment.
Well, if it's a book, it's necessarily present, isn't it?
But what makes a past book become a present book?
I think that'd be quite hard. If it's gone into the past, it's not going to come back into the present, is it? If it's a past book, it means what, you've burnt it or something, or you've destroyed it, you've sent it to be recycled.
Well, yesterday's book, the book that you had on your table yesterday, what makes it become the book on your table today?
Well, if it's yesterday's book, it can't become anything because it's already out of existence.
Okay.
If you mean something more like, how does a substantial cause become a substantial effect or something, You don't use the word yesterday, or I don't know what exactly what you're trying to ask.
Yeah, I don't know.
How does seed become
Time
sprout?
doesn't cause the book to change, to become older.
No, time's not the causal factor. I mean, time is the changing of things, really. Time is just recognized by the fact that things go through the process of change. So then we say there's time. If nothing ever changed, then nobody would talk about time. I think time is like a way of kind of addressing this aspect of things, constant transformation.
Is it a cooperative condition, time of book?
Yeah.
Everything, if it's a functioning thing, it's a cause, isn't it? But is time the cause of change? Is the time the cause of the book's disintegration, or the time the cause of the book transforming? And I wouldn't think so. Or cooperative condition. I don't think time causes the book to change, or is a cooperative condition of the time changing.
But what does time cause then?
It causes its own next moment, isn't it? Like consciousness, it just causes its own next moment.
But I mean, a book couldn't exist without time, could it? Could you have objects without time?
Probably not, no. I mean, as I say, once something is changing, then you start talking about time. Time is some sort of thing that's like there.
Then how come time isn't the cooperative condition for everything?
What does it actually do? What does it actually do?
Don't know.
Monday changes into Wednesday, and Monday changes into Tuesday. Tuesday changes into Wednesday. So is that time like Monday causes Tuesday? Monday becomes Tuesday? Or Monday just stops and Tuesday begins? It's not that one causes the other. The sun goes around the earth, so it's although at once, and so that's Monday then, and it goes around the earth. Oh, sorry, the earth goes around the sun. Well, the earth rotates on its axis once, isn't it? The earth going around the sun's a year, but the earth rotating on its axis fully in one circuit, that's Monday. And it does it again, so that's Tuesday. Not like Monday's causing Tuesday, is it? It's the Earth's rotating, so then we divide up that continuum of change into segments. We call one of them Monday, one of them Tuesday. But we don't say this. It doesn't seem necessary to say Monday is the cause of Tuesday. But I just said Time is the cause of its own next moment, isn't it? Spring causes summer. I don't know. Spring just gives way to summer. There's a whole chapter. We have to read Nagarjuna's chapter on time. There is a chapter in his fundamental wisdom stanzas. But how easy it is, I don't know. It's not a long chapter, but it's there is a chapter. So Tom Carper probably would have something to say about the conventional nature of time in that chapter. Yeah, there's definitely one chapter about time. So maybe we should look at Tom Carper's presentation of that. Anyway, so we've discussed that view of how there's, you know, if you look for it in the ultimate way, there is no present. But I say it's difficult to grasp with, isn't it? You know, does it really make sense? You have to come up with your own examples. Can you find something that is happening in the present? So come with your own example of an action that is unfinished, you know, that is genuinely going on now. We'll have to examine it. Maybe you find an example that doesn't break down into, oh, it's half completed and half not completed. So there is, you know, maybe you can go with some more tricky examples. And then how from that do you actually meditate on emptiness? How do you actually meditate on emptiness? There's no arising. Yeah. The arisen doesn't arise. That which is arising doesn't arise because you can't find it. It doesn't ultimately arise, let's say. I mean, use Tom Carper's qualification ultimately. So the past doesn't arise, so it doesn't arise ultimately. The present, you can say, conventionally arises. There's something conventionally arising in the present, but there's no ultimate, there's nothing which is ultimately arising. And in the future, nothing's begun to arise yet, so there's neither arising nor ultimate arising in the future. So it's in the present, there's no ultimate arising. Arising doesn't inherently exist, so because it doesn't exist in any of the three times. So when you meditate, no, yeah, so there's no arising. If you really realize that, then you really would have realized emptiness, wouldn't you? There's no kind of ultimate arising, no arising by way of its own power. So that really would be voidness, wouldn't it? Nothing ever arises. Which is what Nagarjuna is trying to tell us. Wake up out of the sleep of our ignorance. There's not even any arising. All void. You and the object, both the same. Okay, well, we'll stop there for tonight then. So the next argument would be there's two arguments there, so we've got one more to come. But if I find some good notes about this one I've just talked about tonight, I'll send them on. But I've just got scrappy notes here, there, and everywhere at the moment, so I haven't got really anything very place to send. But there is a note in the back, so don't forget that. Yeah. So maybe we start off next week by reading that. So that'll be appendix appendix number 2. End note number 2. End note number 2. So I think I'll read that when I come back. I'm not saying it's perfect, yeah. I'm not saying I fully understand what's going on. I've still got these qualms. But you know, the example about reading. Well, what is that? You have to just look at it and see. The non-existent arising apart from the arisen and the unarisen. So you have got a note there, page 28, 29, something to read. Okay then, better stop there. That's enough for tonight.